Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today, How to Engage Data Stewards in the Work of Data Governance. Thanks for attending, really appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and get started here. Since we only have half an hour and we've got a lot of material to cover. One thing I wanted to just mention is as far as questions are concerned, there is a questions area within the GoToWebinar. You can put questions in there. I'll try to keep an eye on it as we're going and answer questions as I can. Otherwise, I'll make sure to leave time at the end to answer questions. A little bit of background on who I am, who we are. I'm Kevin Campbell. I'm the CEO of DTA Healthcare Solutions. We're a healthcare specific consulting company based in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. And we focus in analytics and data for healthcare. A product that we have is called Compendium Data Catalog, and that's what you'll see around this presentation. That's the branding around this. You'll see the logo in the lower left, but that's a product that we offer to help organize your data and information assets and provide a catalog to view that and information about that across your organization. The agenda for today, we're going to talk about what a data steward is, what a data steward does, the case for having data stewards, why you need them, how you can engage data stewards and when's a good time to do that, and then how to support them going forward. And as I mentioned, I will try to leave some time for questions at the end. Let's start with some definitions just to get us all on the same page. Enterprise data governance, when we talk about that, our working definition is that's the discipline of defining, monitoring, and managing data from initial entry and capture all the way through to the use of that data to make decisions across your whole organization. That's enterprise data governance. The data governance program then involves the roles, the processes, the policies you create, the things that are in place to establish and maintain successful data governance. That's the actual teeth of data governance. And then data stewards play into that. They're subject matter experts from across the organization who have been deputized and enabled in order to help support the data governance program. That's their role. All right, so let's dig a little bit more into what a data steward is. If I can get my slides to advance. So a data steward may be called a data owner. There's several names you may hear, and they may refer to the same thing. There's no official national standard or international standard. You might hear information steward, you might hear analytics steward, and those are usually in organizations that are a little further along in their data governance journey and can kind of have more gradations of that role. Most often you hear data steward. You may also hear data owner, as we've got listed on the slide. Sometimes organizations will split those out. They will mean different things. So data owner may be more of in an executive role, and then the data steward is somebody who's more the feet on the ground, if you will, of getting that, of managing that data and governing that data. So, and it also may be the data owner means what we're talking about with data steward. So there is some fluidity there, and just wanted to call that out. Data steward is a member of the business, quote unquote, not the data and analytics team. So they work in a clinical area or an operational area, and they're helping to provide insight into that area for the data. There's somebody who works closely with the data subject matter on a daily basis. So they may not be working specifically with the data. They may not be analysts, for example, but they understand the content, better than anybody, and so that's why they're a steward of that particular area. They're also somebody who has skin in the game. So you want to have people in this role who benefit from having better data governance. So they need to have some skin in the game to help incentivize them to improve the quality of that data and the definition around that data. And then there's somebody who, with sufficient support, is willing to take responsibility for defining and monitoring the data that falls into their purview. So if there's somebody who's maybe the expert, but they don't want to take responsibility, that's going to be pretty tough. But it definitely has to be something where it's somebody who wants to take on that role. Now, these are not hard and fast rules. There are certainly exceptions to this, especially as we get into having data stewards only being a member of the business outside of that data team. But this is just kind of the 80-20 of when we talk about data stewards, the type of role that we're talking about. All right, so what do? What's their role? For their area of responsibility, so a data steward isn't a data czar. They're not somebody who, and I've heard some organizations try to do this in the past, where they want to have one person who's responsible for data quality across the organization or for definitions across the organization. And as we'll get into, that's overwhelming. So data stewards are assigned to specific subject areas that they have expertise in. And so for their area of responsibility, data stewards facilitate the definition of the data. So it could be metrics or data elements. They're facilitating that. Facilitate means they're not doing everything. They're bringing others into the project, into the effort. But there needs to be somebody who facilitates that work effort. They're also going to be the main person who answers questions about their particular subject area. So if somebody wants to know more about how this data is defined, they don't understand, maybe they're looking at the data catalog, they see a definition, they have more questions. This is the person that they would go to help answer those questions. They use provided tools. I just mentioned the data catalog. That's kind of the tool of the trade for a data steward. So they're going to use tools that have been provided to them to help govern the data. So that's going to include documenting definitions and other metadata. You may have data quality monitoring tools, so they would leverage those to leverage the data quality of the data they're working with, and then developing training material around that. Now, these folks probably are not skilled in developing training material, but they're, again, using tools, they're leveraging resources you have in education and providing that content to create training, data-specific training, if applicable. Okay, so why do you need data stewards? What's the purpose of them? Are they optional? Are they really just kind of a nice to have? Well, they're bringing their expertise to the data. So they're bringing that expertise into the machine that's creating data and analytics in your organization. As I mentioned before, the scope of data governance is overwhelming. So you need more people in that effort. And why is that? So the complexity of data and calculations, especially in healthcare, there's no simple metric within healthcare, whether it's, length of stay or readmission rate or CAUTI, CLABSI, mortality. All of those things they may sound simple, but as any of you who have worked with that data know, it never is. So just the complexity means that when you're working with a data element or a metric, it's time consuming and it's difficult to come to consensus on those definitions. And then the sheer volume of data that we're dealing with these days. So, and that doesn't just include the data, the raw data, which is a lot. You've got databases, you've got data elements within those. Each of those has some sort of definition. But then you may have hundreds to thousands of reports. You may have, hundreds of dashboards and metrics. So there's a lot of, we call those information assets. There's just so many of those that one person or a small group of people can't take that on. And a quick shameless plug along those lines, we recently released a video called Taming Your Healthcare Data with the Data Catalog, and we get into that complexity and volume and try to demonstrate for people why that's such a challenge in healthcare, because sometimes it's hard to convince people of that. So I would recommend you hit our website and take a look at that and see if that can be helpful as you try to describe to your managers and executives why this is such a difficult challenge. All right, shameless plug is over. It takes a village. So we need diverse expertise, again, across diverse data sets. We need that diversity and expertise to help govern that data. Collective knowledge is always better. Hopefully with the collective knowledge of your organization, we can get better results as far as data goes. And part of that is historical context. So you've got people who are newer to the organization, you've got people who've been around a long time. Just finding out why has this been defined this way? Why have we done this way? And there are people who know that historical context and that why that's invaluable. And then the concept of many hands make light work. So again, just taking that and spreading it out to the organization so that you can actually manage this overwhelming task of enterprise data governance. To kind of continue to drive home just the why of data stewards, let's talk a little bit about the life cycle of data integrity. So there's many points of failure throughout the data life cycle. And you really have to take all of that into account when you're doing enterprise data governance, and hence why we need more people to help out with that. So we've got the data starts at acquisition, right? So somebody is recognizing that they're recognizing the data either manually or their data is coming in perhaps from a machine. And we can have problems there with a scale not being calibrated right, or the sensor falls off, or somebody's making an incorrect judgment, diagnosis judgment, or what have you. Then there's entry, so they're acquiring the data, and then in some cases they're entering that. When it comes to machine values and things like that, those are going directly in. But when a person is entering that data into an EMR, for example, they can mistype it, they can skip a field, they can put the data in the wrong field. Maybe there's no place to put the data. That's a problem as well. That's a breakdown. Then we're storing the data. With storage, there could be a database error, there could be system issues, records could be dropped for whatever reason. This is probably the least likely with modern database technology of the other areas of breakdown, but it still can happen. Then we have data integration. So in order to analyze data, we generally need to integrate it with other data. So that's where we can have issues with mapping improperly. There's missing linking data, perhaps, and so the data sets don't line up correctly. And then we have storage again. So we're storing that data often in an integration platform, whether it's a data warehouse, could be a reporting system, any platform that is storing integrated data. And again, we have the same issues where we could be dropping records, we could be losing a chunk of data without knowing. So we have those issues. So then as we're getting into the retrieval and reporting, or the analysis and reporting, we have retrieval. So we're pulling that data, we're querying it. And in doing that, the person pulling it, if it's a manual query, they could pick the wrong field, they could join data sets incorrectly, and that can cause wrong data, can cause duplicate records, things like that. So, and that can happen in reports, it can happen in queries. So we've got a breakdown potential at the retrieval layer. And then when we're doing analysis and definition, so we're creating a report, for example, maybe the person is using a non-standard definition when they're creating that chart. Maybe they're calculating something incorrectly. If we're talking about analysis and data science, maybe improper analytic technique is being used. And finally, when we have that data being displayed or coming back in a query, there's interpretation, obviously, of the person who's looking at it. And so they can make an incorrect interpretation. Their assumptions can be faulty. Maybe the visuals are misleading. It makes it look like a process is doing well when it's not, or it's going crazy when it's totally normal variation. There's a lot of those issues that can happen. So all of this to demonstrate the complexity of the issue that we're up against. And so when we have not only a lot of data around the organization, but then with each data element, we have this life cycle of how the data moves from acquisition all the way through to interpretation from a decision-making and analytics standpoint. There's a lot of places that we have to take into account where things can go wrong. And so having more data stewards that can really drill into these things is really important. Now, in some organizations, they may even be far enough along that they can have multiple data stewards around similar data, but at different parts of the life cycle. And you do see this already to an extent with in that front end of the data acquisition and data entry. You have your health informatics, app team, clinical decision support. So there's some of that separation now. And they're kind of acting in that data stewardship role. And then most of the data stewardship that we think of is from integration and forward. But having that full perspective is essential if you're going to tackle enterprise data governance. Okay, so finally, the final slide on the case for why do we need data stewards. They also spread data governance outward. So they're applying their expertise inward to the data, but then they're also helping spread good data governance outward to the organization. So a big piece of that is just, when people are represented in any process, they're going to have greater trust. So having data stewards from finance areas and from quality and from operations, it's going to help those groups feel like they have representation in that whole data machine, as I mentioned. So that helps build trust. It helps buy-in. It's very important to have all of that in order to be able to achieve good data integrity and good data governance. Also, trained data stewards help make data literacy a reality. So they're getting trained on data. They're getting their hands dirty in data. They're understanding what it means to have good definitions and things like that. And what's the difference between a report and analytics. And so that they're starting to spread that data literacy out as well. And you can leverage some of the things that you've done with them in training your data stewards to then, push that out to the broader organization. Okay, so how should we engage data stewards and when's a good time? Well, let's start small. That's always the best way to go. So we don't overwhelm the process and have it fail. That's what we don't want to have happen. So start with a few data stewards, max. Make sure that the stewardship role is tied to an active, significant use case. So we don't want this to be theoretical. We don't want to train data stewards to something that isn't really tangible. So if you have an active use case that's significant to the organization, that really helps in a lot of ways. We want to have an achievable scope, obviously. So we want something that can actually be done. And that might mean just starting with creating definitions, doing a current state of what are the definitions of these data elements that are on these reports or what have you. Then you can build over time. So once you establish that baseline and you get people used to thinking about data governance, used to maybe going to the data catalog and finding the basic definitions they need, you can then grow that over time. So you can add data stewards when you have new use cases that come in. Again, so you're not training people who then don't use what they've learned. You can bring in additional metadata, so starting to look at metric definitions and maybe centralizing and standardizing metrics. providing lineage information, which means where did this data come from originally? What's its path, as we kind of showed with that life cycle, and adding that to the information. So you can build that over time and not try to do all of that at once. And of course, we want to train data stewards. We want to help them understand their role. What does it mean to be a data steward? What's my responsibility? All that stuff. And then certainly the tools, again, making sure that they're well trained on the tools that are going to help them do their job well. All right. So how do we support data stewards going forward best? We like the hub and spoke model. I think it works really well for data governance in general. It's a good way to think about it. So think of the hub being steering committees. Maybe you have a data governance steering committee, a group of executives or directors who can help make decisions, who can help break ties, all that stuff, who can help define and spread the various standards and processes. And then you really need to have a group of people that are responsible for facilitating data governance in your organization. So you don't get an everybody but nobody kind of scenario. We have 50 data stewards, but nobody really knows what to do, and nobody is really ultimately responsible for having the program go forward. So that's where a data governance office doesn't have to be huge, 1 or 2 people, well, let's say more than one, but 2 people, 3 people is at least a good start. And those folks are tasked with facilitating data governance and making sure that it moves through the organization. They're a resource to data stewards. They're interfacing with the steering committee to help them see what's going on and to discuss issues that they're facing. Central tools, processes, and standards. So again, that group is going to help decide on tools. They're going to develop processes and standards, and doing that centrally and then making that available to the data stewards is really essential, because your data stewards have day jobs. They're not going to be getting together and doing tool selections. They just don't have the time. So there needs to be a group that drives that. You need to make sure the data stewards have somewhere to go for help, whether it's with a tool, whether it's questions about, how do I write good definitions? How do I create goals around metrics? What's a good methodology for doing that? They really need to have somewhere to go for that kind of assistance. And of course, ongoing training, and then collaboration touch points. What we mean by that is have a way of getting data stewards together on a webinar like this on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. Get them together, have them maybe present a use case, something that's been successful, discuss some challenges, provide a way for them to interact with each other. And then that can also be a venue for ongoing training for new things that you want to spread out to the organization. You also want to make sure, I mentioned the steering committee, you want to make sure data stewards have somewhere to go for help, as I mentioned, but also an escalation path. So if they run into an issue, they need a decision. Let's say they're trying to get a group together to, we'll use a sticky one, to define what a visit is. What's going to be how do we count visits at our organization? And they just can't agree. They can't come to consensus as a group. There needs to be somewhere to go with that to find out, okay, do we decide we're going to have multiple definitions of visit? Are we going to get to one and we just need, executives to make a decision? So they've got to have that path so that they know where to go with things. Want to make sure you listen to them. They're a great resource, and that'll help support them if they know they're being listened to. So you'll be able to improve the tools and data architecture to meet their needs, or hopefully you will. So as they're using the data catalog, as they're using the data warehouse or the analytics environments, they're going to be great people who have feedback on how to make those things better, and you want to make sure that you listen to that and support them in their needs. And then finally, you want to leverage their feedback so that future data stewards have better onboarding, so they have better support. So really, they're going to, especially those initial data stewards, are going to help you be able to define a better program for future data stewards. And so you want to definitely tap into that resource and continue to make that better. All right, we're 4 minutes to the end. Went through that real quickly. Is there any questions that you have, any clarification, anything you want me to go over again? You will get the slides after today, so you'll be able to look through these again. But again, if you have any questions, use the Q&A functionality in the GoToWebinar, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And if you don't, have a good rest of your day. Appreciate you listening in, but I'll wait a few minutes and see if any